Welcome to the LD Aviation Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Dyer, and today we're serving up something special. We're diving into a topic that's a whole lot tastier than your average aviation discussion: catering in the aviation industry. Now, I know what you're thinking. How hard can it be to grab a sandwich and put it on a plane? Well, imagine this. Your VIP client is expecting a Michelin star meal at 40,000 feet, and instead you're scrambling to find a vending machine that stocks gourmet almonds. So spoiler alert, that is not going to cut it. To help us break down the delicious details of aviation catering, I've invited not one but two amazing guests to join me today. So first up is Jonathan Bird, a true expert in aviation catering with 22 years of experience at Galley Gourmet. Jonathan has spent over 2 decades on the provider side of aviation catering, mastering the art of delivering exceptional dining experiences to private jets. He's seen it all, from flawless feasts to catering catastrophes, and he's here to share some insider tips to help your flight department avoid culinary chaos. Joining him today is Alexander Fernandez, an industry professional who knows how to turn a simple meal into a sky-high dining experience. Alexander brings extensive experience on the consumer side of aviation catering, working directly with flight departments and crews to ensure every meal meets high expectations. So from logistics to last-minute changes, Alexander is a pro when it comes to ensuring everything is plated perfectly. And trust me, he's got some entertaining stories to share as well. So together, we're going to explore the art of delivering unforgettable dining experiences on board, some tips for handling unexpected catering hiccups, and creative ideas on how to wow your passengers. So whether you're in the cockpit, on the ground, or just love a good behind-the-scenes story, buckle up, because this episode is sure to be a flavorful ride. Let's get started. Welcome, Jonathan and Alexander.
Hello, good day.
Hello. So good to have you guys.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
So I think we're going to, great. I think we're going to start out with, we're going to start about quality, just the quality of aviation catering in general. Could each one of you share a memorable example of a time when some exceptional catering made a huge impact on the passenger's experience?
This was closer to the 20 years ago when I first got there. We had a huge order that came in over. It was probably around 6 p.m. and due 24 hours later. It was for Saudi Arabian prince, and it was. We got the order and everything looked good, and then the next morning it was due. Not like 6 p.m. It was due at 12 o'clock noon, and cut the operating time on the order by half. And I'll never forget the tropical flowers in the triangular vase. We're from Atlanta, and tropical flowers are very hard to find, and triangular vases turned out to be almost impossible to find as well. But it was
so that was part of their order. They wanted tropical flowers in a triangle vase. Wow.
Yes, very, very nitty and gritty. Just very fine details. And we got the tropical flowers, but we failed on the triangular vase. But turned out we had one. We just didn't realize it at the time.
That's crazy. All right. Well, you got the tropical flowers, though, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Last minute stuff. Alexander, how about you? I know you're on the other side. How did you maybe prepare one?
Not necessarily in preparation, and just thinking about an experience that really impacted a passenger's response. I've kind of always had it burned into my brain, right? Like, you're only as good as your last flight. And when I learned that, it kind of always seemed that catering was the point that would make it a good flight or not a good flight for many of my passengers before. So, then I just kind of focused on catering a lot. And, with catering, I remember one specific day years back, running some flights for like a shuttle, and the aircraft was hours late, and really what saved the day for the passengers was the catering. So it wasn't any kind of extravagant catering, just the simple catering, really. And honestly, the experience with the FBO being able for the serving the passengers or the guests their catering meal kind of took them out of that hangry mode,
Sure.
right? And that kind of saved the day for the delay. And a lot of the times, operations wise, we can focus on so many other things, and it just is funny how catering really can set that difference of a good experience or a good private flight experience versus a bad private flight experience. And it doesn't have to be anything exciting or extravagant, just simply fill those bellies, right?
Right. I love that hangry, because you're right. That's what we all get when we're starting to be off schedule there.
For sure.
Alexander, let me start with you on this one then. What factors do you think flight departments, or what have you considered when selecting a catering provider?
Good question. I think in terms of any kind of provider, I focus a lot on actually the company culture. I've had experiences from some of the larger commercial airline caterers into the small one shop, one guy private flight catering department. And the culture of that company or your supplier really is huge, because it makes the difference of that quality that you're going to want, right? I mean, again, just comparing to these large almost factory style airline caterers, you don't get the same kind of love and care in the catering and the meal, the presentation, the food quality. And I don't know, just kind of my own hippie-ish mentality, if you will, right? Is they, kind of like when mom makes a sandwich, she puts the love into that sandwich, and it's the best tasting sandwich. And so I kind of feel the same about any kind of catering or anywhere that you go eat. That dining experience really depends on the culture and the individuals preparing your meal. So I really focus a lot on the culture, and that also kind of leads into how good of a relationship or a partnership you could have, right? Because you should consider them as partners, right? Because if, in my experience, the catering can make or break your flight, they're a partner at the end of the day to give your passengers or your clients that elevated experience.
Yeah, so true. So true. So Jonathan, I'll pop it over to you. And like you being the provider, like what do you find people ask you about, or how do you provide consistent quality?
Yeah, we don't get too many actual questions about this, but I mean, I can tell you about what we do as a kitchen. I mean, like our produce, we get a lot of times 2 trucks a day, very fresh produce. I mean, just the quality and the freshness, as well as the employees. Employees are a big part of it too. I'd say we have a staff of about 45 employees, and half of them have been there over 10 years.
Wow.
Just
Awesome.
long-standing. You treat your employees well, they'll turn the love into the food, and it's kind of a culture thing. Just quality of the people and quality of the food, and just pushing for greatness and to excel. Great
That's
tasty
awesome.
food.
And I know I didn't say this before, but I used to work out of Atlanta. And so before we started recording, Jonathan and I talked a little bit about this, but I have used and ordered from Galley Gourmet 20 years ago. So you guys are still going strong. I love it. I'm going to start with Jonathan then on this one. Let's talk about maybe some dietary restrictions or special requests. I'm sure you get them all the time. How do you provide and show to your clients that you have, catered to those dietary restrictions?
We deal with, labels. Take gluten-free, dairy-free, I'm personally both of those, so I understand the importance of it. And it's challenging in some ways because gluten-free food doesn't always taste as good as regular gluten food. And trying to get it to that level is tough because it's not going to taste as good generally. I mean, there's some foods out there that are close, but nothing like a good wheat roll.
Sure.
Loaf of white
So
bread.
yeah, but yeah, it's challenging, but we most definitely try to make sure everything's labeled and all the allergens are noted before they leave the kitchen.
Nice. Alexander, do you have examples on either side? Either? Boy, that didn't come out right.
Either one.
On either side of maybe what you've received or maybe times when you haven't received the information about the restrictions?
Yeah, I have to agree with what Jonathan said. Labeling is key. And so, when we talk about finding a good caterer and a caterer that you want to work with long term, again, you could have, you can have a caterer that has a sophisticated, structured operation, and you could have, a mom and pop, just, one chef kind of guy. And it's always important, really, I think, again, saying what Jonathan said, right? Like, make sure the label's there and communicating that to your caterer that you want to, not just want to, that you need to see those labels, right? Because when that order arrives at the FBO, depending on who's accepting it, right? I mean, I'm sure that corporate flight attendant is going to want to read and ensure who his or her passengers are, make sure that, depending on their processes and procedures, they may sure enough have like a passenger intake form. And they're going to want to check to make sure that the catering order that arrived is labeled appropriately with, any dietary restrictions or, food allergies, so it's extremely important, I think, to have those labels on there. Now, from the flight department's perspective, right, it's also important to ask those kinds of questions.
Yes.
We do so many different operations, whether you're a 135 operator and you're going through different passengers or groups of passengers constantly. It's important to have some type of intake or understanding of those dietary restrictions for your passengers, because if you don't ask the question, your passengers show up, sure enough, they're gluten-free, and you brought them, a loaf of Wonder Bread, they're not going to be happy, right? So that's it. You broke that's it. You lost that opportunity. They're going to move on to another operator next time. And then alternatively, if you're, running a private flight department of Part 91, where you've got the same set of a principal and his or her group, same people in and out. I mean, you're only going to get one chance really to kind of make or break that experience. And if you didn't take or if you did set up an intake form and you just didn't follow the instructions, or if you have that intake form, didn't give the instructions to the caterer, and just foods that they're allergic to showed up, that's it, right? You lost credibility there. So it's all part of the chain. A lot of it too, if you get it wrong and you have to report back to the principal or to the flight department or whoever, right? They're going to see that. They're going to know, okay, well, did you have an intake form? Yes. Did you give the instructions to the caterer? Yes. Was it checked when it got there? No. Did you take an intake form? No. So it's easy to identify where that break was, because if you have to report back to an executive assistant or, someone of that like, those are probably the questions they're going to ask for. They're going to ask, and you want to make sure that everything's covered, that you did X, Y, Z.
Yep. Very good point. Not only is it on the caterer providing the food, but it's on the person ordering. You have to know what you need.
Sure enough. I mean, and, I know that there's a lot of opportunity sometimes, or, we have flights. We talk about a flight, cabin attendant. it's not always the cabin attendant that is serving the meal. Maybe it's a smaller aircraft, right? We have so many different size aircraft that you might not have a cabin attendant on board, and you have the
Sure.
Pilot's priority is never catering, right? So,
Yep.
that flight department also, I think, needs to do a good job. If you have an intake form, or there's dietary restrictions, or if it's a complicated catering request, what are you doing to ensure that it arrived properly? One of the things that I've had to do in the past is, you time it out. Okay, well, when is that catering order supposed to be delivered? And when it's delivered, I'm calling the FBO and asking them, please check that all of this is labeled. Here's what I sent the caterer. Make sure that all the meals are there, quantity is there, and that it's got this kind of label. But you will need to give yourself enough time to do that, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that, because not a lot of us do make those phone calls to check if the catering is there. But I love the detail that you're saying. Have them go look at the actual catering, count the number of box lunches, because I think I can't even count the number of times when either I ordered wrong or they delivered wrong. And if you do that, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depends on what your process is, you would have time to fix it before that airplane leaves. Yep. Very cool. How about what catering challenges have you guys faced in your career? Maybe either serving it, like you were talking about the triangle vase, but what other types of challenges do you face on either side? Anybody can.
It's funny. I had once. I mean, this was so many years ago, right? When I say so many years ago, at least like about 10. And technology's changed a lot. Availability of things and items have changed a lot. I remember myself. I used to be a flight attendant, and finding myself one time somewhere in North Dakota, and I just couldn't get Fiji water. Right, the caterer didn't have it. It wasn't locally available. I could, and it was like one of those situations where we were meant to overnight in one place, but then our scheduling department booked the flight and ferried us over to North Dakota last minute, and you couldn't get Fiji water. But our trip the next day, sure enough, was a VIP charter that required Fiji water, was in the contract, and it was a broker that we knew what's in the contract, you better provide, otherwise they're going to be asking for rebates, refunds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you do in that case? And you got to get resourceful. And sure enough, thankfully, we live in an era with Amazon Prime, and that's a solution actually to a big challenge sometimes, is Amazon Prime. Sure enough, if you got enough time, if you have availability, whatever, but it's just interesting that the caterer couldn't get it for me, but it was available on Amazon Prime.
That's hilarious. That you're right. Use all your resources. All your resources. Jonathan, what about you? Any other challenges?
Yeah, we this was probably at least 10, 15 years ago. We had a last minute Boeing 747 that needed to be fully stocked with. They actually asked for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 300 people, and they really wanted it in like 2 to 3 hours. We had one guy working at the time and actually he came to me and said, "I don't think this is possible. Should I tell him no?" And so we told him, "Don't say no, just get a little extra time." And so within 30 minutes, we had people I'd never even seen working in our kitchen before. And we fully stocked it, all sodas, snacks. And I mean, we didn't feed them with 3 meals. We just fed with 2 meals. But within 4 hours, we had the plane fully loaded and ready to go.
600 meals in 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
So.
That is great. I love that, because I think that's what, Alexander, you were talking about, the smaller companies. Galley Gourmet is smaller. I believe you only have the one location, but you really can pull out all the stops and and cater specifically to a request like that.
Yeah, sure.
That's
And,
cool.
and, and again, back to what we said earlier, right? It's the culture. Clearly, Jonathan, they have a team over there with a great culture and that don't say
Yeah.
no mentality, right? That doesn't go along with all companies, all suppliers, all providers. And so, sure enough, right? I've had moments where I request something from a much larger company, and they're like, "No, can't do it." Jonathan was able. Jonathan and his team was able to do it in what was it, 6 hours? You said,
I think it was within 4 to 5 hours we had it done.
right? So
And
you didn't say
yeah,
no, and you got it done in the timeline in a very, very, very short timeline for such a large aircraft. That's incredible, and that shows
yeah.
the culture that you talk about, having people there for 20 plus years. They know how to get it done.
They do. Jonathan, do you have any suggestions for flight departments or anybody who's ordering catering for those last minute requests? Like, should we be ordering specific things, staying away from other things? Like, what should we do if it's a last minute request?
I mean, even last minute, it depends on who you are to how last minute is. I mean, for us, to some people, day or 2 days before is very last minute. But I mean, to us, an hour before, we can still pull off the same thing that we could have if it was ordered the day before. It just depends on, what airport is going out of, because we cover really all over the Southeast out of the one kitchen.
Wow.
As far as like Mobile and sometimes into Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, pretty much all of it. And so, yeah, we can make anything happen. It's just a matter of, how much time do we have, and what can we do in that amount of time? We'll be upfront and honest. Yeah, we don't think this could happen, or sure, we can pull it off. Just the other day, I got a call. They wanted us to go down to Savannah, basically, and it's a 4-hour drive down there. And they were like, "Oh no, this was to Macon, which is an hour and a half away." And they were like, "Yeah, we need it in 19 minutes." Sorry, but unless you send a jet, we can't pull it off.
So drive time. I think that's a really good point too, because maybe if you're looking for a local caterer and the local one just, as long as you have enough time for drive time, I guess is my point, you might be able to source catering from a further out location. Because if you're going to Macon and you're doing some of these long drives, it sounds like with enough time, you could use somebody that's not located in the city you're flying into.
Correct. Yeah, we for all our further away out of a metro Atlanta area, we pack everything on ice where it's not going to freeze the food, but also keep it refrigerated, basically. And we'll send it 5-6 hours away, and it's totally fine. And we do have reefer trucks if needed, but for the larger orders. But they for the majority of the orders, we'll kind of just put it on ice packs and send it out the door.
Nice. Very cool. What, Alexander, like on your side, when you're doing the ordering of the catering, do you have any steps that you or processes that you use to kind of ensure that you can mitigate delays or errors prior to departure?
Yeah, I kind of always look at everything. Risk mitigation is key in what we do. So if something can go wrong, what can go wrong, and right, trying to figure out solutions before or if they happen. When you talk about last minute catering like that, just have kind of some solutions in place that that you can go to in case a caterer doesn't deliver. But otherwise, making sure you're giving yourself enough time, right? Just kind of mitigating those delays. You can call it very, very attention to detail, OCD, anal, whatever, right? But mentioned drive time. And so there's been moments for sure where if I need to ensure that the catering is going to be delivered. What time is my flight? Okay, the time is here. Okay, so the kitchen is in point A, the airport is in point B. What's that drive time? And not what's that drive time the moment that I thought of planning, and I'm Googling what is my what's my scheduled time of departure, and what's the traffic look like at that time, right? For the relative to the time of departure.
Yeah.
What's the distance? Some things that a lot of people forget to consider, especially when we're doing these charters, is charters may or may not be for a special event. So it's not standard traffic. There may be roads blocked, right?
Yes.
Here down, I'm based in Opelika in Miami, and then anywhere here in South Florida now, one thing to consider is the TFRs, and when the president comes to town. And so sure enough, where our airport is right here in Opelika, it's kind of in a middle point between PBI, right, Palm Beach, and the Trump Resort in Doral. So there might be a lot of traffic delays, road closures that happen unexpectedly. And those are really kind of attention to detail things to consider if it's super critical that catering arrives. Weather, right? What kind of weather or season are you operating in? Could there be snow delays, rain delays? I think really the most basic thing to do is make your delivery time standard 2 hours prior departure. I think a lot of people consider an hour and a half, and maybe half hour makes or breaks a difference, right? That might give you, sure enough time to find an alternative solution to make sure that you just don't have anything to feed your passengers.
Yep.
I agree with that. 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it's pretty critical. We do both sides, ground and airplane, and for airplane, we try to get at least 2 hours. For the ground side, it's more time sensitive. People complain more for ground orders when it's too early, but for the aircraft side, though, it's not going to like self-destruct if they're too early. I think it's really really good to just get it there early and not then you're not stressing over it being late, or if it does show up 30 minutes late, then it's not going to make or break the order itself.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, important to understand there's so many factors, right? I mean, for example, I mentioned locally here down in South Florida, over in FLL, at one of the FBOs. I know that there's a caterer that you could order it 2 hours ahead, but they kind of have the one driver that's always going there, right? Because they have daily drop-offs. So he's got a specific time based off where the kitchen's at, where he knows, all right, well, I'm always going to FLO anyways. I'm going to show up at this time, and I'm going to make sure I've got everything and drop everything off. And so it may be earlier than 2 hours, or it may be later than your 2 hour mark, right? So just kind of having that understanding with the FBO or where the delivery is going to happen. Like, hey, I'm using this company. How do they deliver? Do they deliver when I ask them to, or do they deliver based off of their driver's schedule? Because that's a thing sometimes, at least I've seen. And Jonathan mentioned, right, the difference between ground side, plane side. Sure, it's really important, I think, to understand your operations, because are you operating out of an FBO? Are you operating off of a remote stand somewhere? Right? Because maybe it's an airport where you don't have any FBOs. Okay, well, where is that catering truck going to enter from? And what's the distance between that entrance gate to where the aircraft is going to be? Then you've got, competing with, aircraft traffic and ground traffic to get, from the gate over to your aircraft. So there's so many things to consider, really. And I kind of think you need to always understand the every specific operation, and don't just generalize. Catering orders, an hour and a half, go ahead and order it with XYZ caterer. And no, that's how you get yourself into trouble.
Yep, totally. I love that 2 hours one. And then I like having your pizza person, like just in case you've got that pizza delivery guy in the background. I've done it a couple of times. Even had the FBO go pick up pizza before.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we mentioned how great technology is nowadays. Uber Eats, and
Yes.
Uber Eats is kind of a savior, because there's so many different, such a wide range of restaurant options that you're going to find on Uber Eats. So,
Yep.
again, here down in South Florida, I can order, Fleming's Steakhouse on Uber Eats.
Yeah.
So
That is okay. I have a couple of things because I want to talk to Jonathan a little bit about packaging because that comes into account with the Uber Eats. But you know what would be cool? You know how Uber Eats takes a picture of where they've dropped it off and you can see that? I wonder if there are any caterers that take a picture of their delivery at the FBO and send it back to the person who ordered that said, hey, here's a picture of it. It's there. Anyway, that would be kind of cool. I don't know. That might be a lot of extra work, but it would eliminate a phone call on our side, the orderer side.
Well, Jonathan, I don't know if your company does this, but I've seen where there are catering drivers that do take the picture, not to confirm to the client, but rather because of their own internal process, right? It's I delivered it. Here you go, right? And
Sure.
Depending on your relationship as a flight department with that caterer, if they're willing to share that image with you or not.
Mm-hmm.
We do have customers that we do that for, and so yeah, we there's an app called Shipday that we sometimes use for customers. It works pretty well actually. So just a matter of getting each driver to fulfill the other end, and is pretty anal about the driver accepting it right when you send it to them, or not. If they don't accept it within 2 minutes, it's going to bounce back, and then it just never happens. But we most definitely do it for that app, and then we have customers that another vendor that makes us load a picture to their website and saves it for them.
So you said it's called Ship Day or Ship Date?
Shipday.
Shipday. And that is like a driver that comes and picks it up, or it's the picture kind of piece of it?
It's an app that is starting to be used in the industry. It's just basically can track the driver, and when you get there, you get a signature in it and a picture, and it's marked.
That is really cool.
Confirmed, delivered.
So if more people wanted to use that, would the user side, like if I'm ordering catering, would I get the app and the catering company would have the app? Or is it usually just...
I'm not sure exactly how that goes. I do know that we have the software basically to use. So I think the caterer just needs to get it.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about the other side of it.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to look into that. That's cool. Oh, before I move too far on, because I want to talk about partnerships with your caterer next, but what about the packaging? Because sometimes if the packaging is not correct, you could end up serving, dried out food. Do you have any suggestions on that?
For the most part, we plastic wrap everything.
Okay.
And then heat seal it with basically a heat pad. We've used this process for over 20 years, and it's probably not, because everything naturally dries out when you go up to 40,000 feet. Food's less flavorful. You lose taste and everything like that. 40,000 feet. So like saltier foods are better as far as, more appetizing, or you taste them better, a little bit saltier and everything like that. But yeah, it's Plastic wrap.
Plastic wrap. Okay. So I suppose if you really wanted, and it was like your passengers weren't going to eat right away, and you had an Uber Eats versus a caterer, maybe you want to take into account your packaging, perhaps some plastic wrap goes on. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a cool. That's a definite. It's a good tip, I'm sure, especially for maybe some of those corporate flight attendants, right? And I'm sure they're all very, very well aware of that. Is that plastic wrap? Because just like Jonathan said, right, when you're in that high altitude, there isn't any moisture, right? So, or you lose that moisture, you lose the taste, so that quality of food is impacted a lot, right? So, sure enough, just like you said, right, there's typically they'll deliver it all in that almost saran wrap, right, to keep that moisture in.
Yeah.
But you don't always get that either from the caterers or, like you said, Lindsay, right? If you're ordering from Uber Eats, you're not going to get that same kind of packaging. Earlier we talked about last minute stuff and alternative solutions and this and that. And one of the things that I've constantly recommended to crew, right? Typically in my work now, I work a lot with crew members and mostly the pilots, not the flight attendants. So I've always recommended to them, it's not a bad idea to keep, go to Costco and you can buy, it's like a 30 pack and it doesn't take up any space in your aircraft, but a 30 pack of like those food prep containers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you just keep those with you because if you're in a pinch, the hotel is excellent, whether it's your hotel or the passenger's hotel, right? I mean, if someone's staying at the Four Seasons going to have good food quality. The packaging, however, may be the challenge. And so if you already have, those food prep containers with you, and then, you can just kind of pop on over to the Four Seasons and say, look, this is what we want, put them in this stuff. And this is how, I want the meats separate. I want my protein separate from my starch, separate from my veggies. If you want bulk or individual packaging, whatever the case is. And then sure, like Jonathan said, you might even ask them to kind of saran wrap all that for you.
That's a great point. Yeah, bring that along with. That's a really good point. And for those that I guess that don't have maybe a flight attendant on board, maybe it's just stocked in the airplane.
It could, yeah, I mean, listen, those containers are excellent, especially right because one thing that we need to consider is, domestic operations are not that challenging because we have easy access to Uber Eats and caterers and hotels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what resources do you have when you're in South America, when you're in Africa, when you're somewhere a bit more remote? So especially in situations like that, you should have a good relationship with the hotel. Typically, when you're staying at these hotels, you're not staying at, a mom and pop motel or an inn.
Yeah.
You're staying somewhere where you're probably going to have some room service. So you've got it available 24/7. And then you just have to figure out how to package it so that there's no compromise in the health and safety of the food. And then get it delivered to the aircraft. So, if you don't have a cabin attendant, these crew members, pilots should be able to have in stock those containers, Ziploc bags, right? Ziploc bags is huge too, tinfoil. So these are kind of just standard things that are really not taking up any space in your stowage, and they're going to really save you in a pinch. If you have to go to maybe like a specialty market or something, you can put that stuff in Ziploc bags, and that way it's not taking up space.
Yeah. Oh, great point. Yeah, I love the Ziploc bags, tinfoil. Great point. Okay, so let's go back to, I was kind of talking about partnerships. How do we create long-term partnerships? Why are they important? Go ahead, either one of you, because it's definitely important, or I think it's important on both sides. So
I have to imagine that many people or many folks on the operations side, because we're juggling so many things at once, you get complacent. You send the email to your caterer and that's it. You wait for the confirmed and done, right? But you lose that relationship, right? So where's the face-to-face? Where's, If I'm ordering from Jonathan, now I see Jonathan. He's seen my face. We know each other, at least to that degree, right? Getting him on the phone. One of the things that I've liked to do in the past, sure, you're going to send that email because you need it in writing. And maybe, on the caterer side, it's a little bit annoying, but I'm going to follow up. I'm going to give it a 30-minute time frame before I call you and say, did you receive my order? How's your day going? Is everything cool? Any questions? What information did I miss? Do you have the time to look at that kind of starts building that relationship, because after the third or fourth call of that, right, they already know your name, they know your voice. If you're working with a specific caterer, or if you've ordered from them frequently enough, see what their ability to invite you in for a kitchen tour might be, right? So you see the operation, have a kitchen tour, see the individuals that are making the food, packing the food, delivering the food, receiving your order, because you might have just someone only receiving the order. So there's so many things in that chain, right, of a very sophisticated caterer, that you just lose that relationship if all you're doing is sending an email back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, with all this technology, back when I started, everything was on the phone and or in person. Nowadays, and I mean, back then it was around the clock. We carried the phone with us, and we were the lifeline of the business, 24 hours a day. I mean, and it's changed now. It's like everything's email or internet driven, and it has lost a lot of the direct touch, and by going this way. But I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but we also need to make sure orders can get lost in the mass email. I think I get about 100 emails a day at least, and it's orders can get lost in that, and make sure you get the follow up reply, and sometimes if you don't hear back, pick up the phone, call us or call whoever you're dealing with.
Well, and just like what Jonathan's saying, right? It's such an around the clock operation that your order may not have got lost in all of that. They received your order, they sent you a confirmed, but is that individual who received the order actually reading through everything? Because what if your order's days out or weeks out, and it's just kind of like, okay, received, no problem, great to go. I want to have that conversation with that individual, make sure that whatever my expectations are fully laid out in that email or in that conversation, right? Yeah. Maybe I didn't express myself well enough in the email, so let's have a chat. This is what I want. I want to see this. I want to see that. Can you send me back, a reconfirmation? Or if not, again, I might be a little annoying to some of my providers at sometimes, because sure enough, I'm going to do that follow-up email as well per our conversation. This is what we spoke about. We changed this, we changed that. I'm going to expect this. I want that. And have everything in writing, but that phone call or that, it really gives that personal touch. So you build that relationship with the individual, taking that actual individual, not just the company, but that person that's receiving your order.
Yeah. And I know we're recording this really the week right before Schedulers and Dispatchers Conference. And that is another good place for you guys to go out and talk to your caterers, like in person, and actually meet them. Jonathan, will Galley Gourmet be there?
No, we haven't gone in probably 10 or 15 years at least. But I'm hoping to get back into that realm of the operation, trying to push the business a little bit further.
I'm always promoting just the networking, just that face to face that you guys were talking about. We're kind of losing that now, but if you can get that, and a lot of the caterers are in that same spot in one spot for at that conference. So very cool. So we talked about a little bit, email, always have it in writing. I agree. I think, Jonathan, when I was first doing catering orders, it was all on the phone. And now everything is via email. What about FlightBridge? I use FlightBridge quite a bit. Is that something that either of you have used for catering orders, and do you like it?
I know I've used FlightBridge in the past. Just I think it's great. It's a great tool because obviously you've got the integration with the rest of your with the rest of your scheduling software, or with your actual operation. I wonder now, right, how that order on FlightBridge is received by the caterer, because sure enough, it may just also look like another email. And that brings us back to the
Yeah.
last point: is that great to send it through email or through an application like FlightBridge? You still should probably, to me, have that follow up phone call.
Yeah. Good point.
We most definitely accept FlightBridge orders, and they are pretty basic orders for the most part. I don't think we've received too many very detailed or complicated orders, but I think the website itself, probably directs more than orders than we just receive through FlightBridge. People might see our name on FlightBridge, but actually reach out directly. I'm not positive about that, but it could happen.
That does make sense, instead of going through the different things and adding, especially if, like you said, you don't have a basic order. You have something that might need some sort of specialty items on it. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's say that something went wrong. You didn't receive it. You weren't able to provide what the operator wanted. Jonathan, how do you prefer to receive feedback, good and bad?
So yeah, we if it can be fixed, if it's not too late to be fixed, then we try to do that. We'll put all our kitchen crew onto the order just to make it happen, to pull it off, if it's not too late. But if it is too late and the order's gone, we'll get emails and figure out what happened. And that's one of my main jobs when it does happen, to reach out to the kitchen, whoever was involved, and try to figure out, okay, what happened? Where did it break down? Was it on us? Was it not on us? Where the mishap happened. A couple of days ago, got an email. We took an order 4 hours away into this middle of nowhere airport, and their fridge was like grandmother's fridge. Is pretty small, and our box didn't fit in the fridge, and we were instructed by the line guys to unpack the box, put it all in their fridge, and that they would get it to the plane. And so we did, and took a picture of it and everything, and turned out the line guys didn't follow through, and passengers unfortunately did not get their food. And but we had documentation, and kind of saved us. But
that's frustrating when there's a middle person in there that you can deliver as well as possible, and then there's somebody in the middle there that kind of messes it up. Super frustrating. Alexander, have you ever had to send feedback?
Feedback's always coming and going in this industry, right? Nothing goes perfect because it's aviation and there's so many factors. That's Jonathan's example is real tough, right? Because like you said, they delivered, and it was another party that kind of dropped the ball. From my perspective, I would say, communication's key. So, the pre-planning and giving yourself, all that risk mitigation, right? Give yourself enough time to kind of recover if there is a mishap like that. A 4-hour drive from, like what Jonathan's saying, from the kitchen, that's really hard to recover from that, right? But
Yeah.
I think what happens a lot of the times is that we, as operations departments, kind of fail to point the finger at us, right? Did I give the right instructions? Was I detailed? Um, you know, there's been times in the past, early on in my career, uh, you sent a catering order and you said that it's going to Opalaka, but you didn't say which FBO, right?
Yeah.
And it shows
Yep.
up at Atlantic, but you're calling Shelter, or you're calling a different FBO, and they're like, no, that order's not here. I know I placed the order. They confirm. So first, I guess before you give any feedback, kind of understand if you had anything to play in making sure that uh, there was no miscommunication, or there could be no room for error there. And after that,
Great
right,
point.
just we've mentioned it a couple times, is give yourself enough time to recuperate. Um, if
Yep.
you have to pull a rabbit out of the hat, I think maybe 2 hours really does give you sufficient time. But it's communication, right? Like, how, unless a communication and relationship, unless someone had spoken to the FBO, how detailed can you get, right? You're talking to the FBO, to maybe your customer service manager at the FBO, or maybe the line service manager, and understand, okay, well, how large, I've got, a very large order. How big is your fridge? Do you have multiple fridges? Do you even have cold storage?
Yeah.
Some places may not have cold storage. Um,
Sure.
so just really kind of understanding all of these things, which is real challenging, because the amount of work that we have to do sometimes, and you've got one individual or two individual running the operations, requesting the order, requesting other things that are outside of catering. They lose focus on all of these details, and it's really hard to kind of check everything off, right? So
Yep.
but if you're communicating, you have a great relationship, okay, Fort Lauderdale, if they receive an order over here in Fort Lauderdale and I make a call over to any one of the FBOs, they know my name, and they're going to say, okay, well, if this order is wrong, or if we left the catering outside of the fridge and it goes bad, and Alex is going to show up and we're not going to have a good time. So those are kind of things that also help help make sure everything goes in order. And at the end of the day, if
True.
really there was just something, if someone just dropped the ball, I think you still have to give clear feedback, right?
Yeah.
You have to say, listen, this didn't go right. We have a relationship. It's not going to mean I don't use you again. How can we avoid this happening in the future? I think that's a
Hmm.
good question to
Yeah.
ask when you give feedback. How can we avoid this happening in the future?
Yeah. Great. Great points. All right, so we kind of talked about a little bit of the stressful, maybe negative kind of sides of things that happen in catering. Let's go to the opposite side and let's talk about some of the really awesome things we can do with aviation catering to really provide a super great, memorable dining experience for the passengers. So let's just start with, how important is the presentation, do you think, of your catering?
It, that's super important to me if I were a passenger, right? And on the operations side, I always want to wow the passenger, and it also depends, I suppose, I guess, on understanding your passengers, understanding your principles, right? Bigger difference between, or bigger challenge between, one-off charter and maybe like a private flight department, Part 91, where they've got the same guy on board and they know what their passengers' likes and needs are. But if it's
Mhm.
maybe they're fine just having something warmed up in the microwave and given to them in the in the box that the catering arrived in. Others, they for sure, more than often than not, are going to want the whole presentation, right? They're going to want, the plate in front of them, and it could really make or break. Again, people, I think, kind of fall on how important, how make or break catering is for your flight, right? I mean, in my case, in many cases in the past, catering has saved the experience um, for delays, AOGs, bad service at the FBO, traffic, whatever, right? Weather delays. Catering has saved the day many times.
So true.
So having that kind of like that presentation where your passengers come, right, and it, if while they're in flight, they're not looking outside at how pretty the aircraft is from the outside, right? Sometimes that presentation of the catering may even benefit how how poor the cabin might look itself, right? Sometimes some aircraft, right? You charter an aircraft and sight unseen, aircraft gets there and the interior isn't maybe what you hoped for, but I
Yep.
think catering can save the day, especially if you get a well presented meal. You know, we talked about it at the beginning. People are always happier when their bellies are full. So if you have a nice
Yep.
presentation, good quality food, and a full belly, it's okay that the carpet doesn't look how I wanted it to look.
Yeah. Good point.
Also that, we kind of eat with our eyes as well as our mouth, it's visual, what's it presented on? Is it presented on china? Is it, are there flowers on board? Kind of just lively up the aircraft a little bit. So it is important, I think. So.
Totally true. Yep. I agree. There's the box lunch people, and then there's the China and plated people. You got to know who you're catering to. Yep. How about trends? Let's talk about some trends. Obviously, we have new trends happening all the time, especially we're seeing on TikTok or Instagram, or at least that's what my kids would show me. But any trends that maybe we should keep an eye out on, either in presentation or types of food or types of orders?
Kind of what I'm seeing a lot lately as well is, unfortunately for some of the great caterers, right, like Galley Gourmet, I'm seeing a lot of cabin attendants start ordering direct from some of the upscale restaurants, right? I think a lot of the upscale restaurants kind of changed their business models post COVID, where some of them may have never thought of catering, right? You come to the restaurant, you eat, and that's the only kind of deal they've got. But now, I guess depending on the location, you've got people ordering direct from these higher end restaurants, and they do have the necessary packaging, and I mean that's a kind of a trend that I'm starting to see now. Jonathan spoke earlier about, right, the science of how taste kind of diminishes, right, at high altitudes. So I guess in terms of cuisine, Asian cuisine to me is something always, popping in flavor, right? So there's always kind of very bold flavors in some Asian cuisine. So you don't lose as much taste with that kind of cuisine. Those are kind of some trends I see a lot more these days.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure on this question. I mean, I guess I'll give you one example. The other day I saw a advertisement of barbecue brisket pot pie, and so I took that to the kitchen, and we're using it in one of the regional meals for one of our customers for the crew. So just kind of taking stuff from TikTok or whatever, and just kind of rolling with it. We're trying to experiment with that kind of stuff now. Just kind of throw some new ideas into the kitchen, and yeah.
That's so cool. Oh, that actually sounds really good. It's about lunchtime over here, so we should have that. So, well, this has been really great. Such a great conversation. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Jonathan, for taking your time to speak with us today. Great information, super great tips.
Thank you for having us.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. You bet. So that wraps up today's episode of the LD Aviation Podcast. Again, huge thank you to Jonathan Bird and Alexander Fernandez for their insights and tips. And if you are looking to reach out to them, you might have any extra questions, you can find them on LinkedIn. You can connect that way, as well as in the trip or the notes below this podcast. You'll be able to see the links directly to them. So, as always, a super big thank you for tuning in, and really be sure to follow the LD Aviation Podcast on your favorite streaming platform so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's discussion, we'd love for you to leave a review and share the episode with your network. You can follow us on social media for more updates, insights, and aviation industry content. Thanks again for joining us. And until next time, keep your standards high and your catering even higher. Thanks, guys.